Judgment Day perhaps awaits for the NCAA. Images of joyous celebration there, Louisville Cardinals winning the NCAA championship, but there's some serious business going on in the courtrooms of this country. Might amateur athletes have to be paid for the services they give to universities? Big question. Rachel Bachman has been covering this quite aggressively for the Wall Street Journal for a long time. Tell us real briefly, if you can, about the Ed O'Bannon case, what's happening in the courts now, and what that means for amateurism in the NCAA.
Sure. Ed O'Bannon is a former basketball player at UCLA. He and a handful of other plaintiffs are suing the NCAA for essentially cut of revenue, saying we helped earn this money, we deserve part of it. Today, a federal judge in California is considering whether to give that case class action status.
And with that class action status, what happens? Thousands of athletes can come on.
That would mean thousands of athletes in recent years, or who can prove they've been harmed in recent years. So maybe it's long ago players, but they can prove that something sold by the NCAA or its partners sold recently harmed them, then they might get a cut.
Right. Now the O'Bannon case, as I understand it, revolves around video game likenesses and play in which players' images are used to sell video games.
Right. Well, that was certainly the impetus of the case. O'Bannon saw himself on a video game and said, hey, wait a minute, I'm not being paid for this, and that spurred the lawsuit. However, the scope of it is wider than that and could potentially include TV rights revenue, like some of the clips we saw with the NCAA tournament. Of course, those are massively valuable contracts. The NCAA tournament contract alone is worth about $11 billion over 14 years. And so if the judge rules that those are also fair game, as they're currently being considered, then we're talking about a much bigger pie to slice
Now,
from.
Rachel, I'm going to editorialize a bit here, and I'm going to say I agree with Jay Billis, who describes the current system of arrangement between players and the NCAA as immoral. I'm not going to ask you to agree with that or disagree with that. But it seems from my perspective that, yes, it is immoral, putting players out there as a product, making billions of dollars, and not sharing really much of an iota of that revenue.
I think what's happened in recent years is you've seen the money associated with college sports absolutely skyrocket for various reasons. It's become much more valuable on television. And so, as I was saying to you earlier, 20 or 30 years ago, when the schools were just making maybe a few $100,000, this was not such a big issue. Now, when the schools are making routinely $100 million a year off of their athletic departments, it's a much more salient issue when you look at what the players stand to gain and what they're helping generate for their universities.
Right, and once a class action perhaps is certified, then what's the real strategy? Is there a settlement that happens, you think, between the players and the NCAA?
Well, it certainly puts a much more pressure on the NCAA to settle, because now we're talking about maybe some millions of dollars to potentially billions, and so the NCAA has to think long and hard about whether it wants to go to trial, which would be a year from today if it's not pushed back. That's what it's scheduled for.
Okay, well, read Rachel's story in today's Wall Street Journal, and we'll be following the case quite avidly, because I think it's incredibly fascinating and says a lot about our culture today.
Very much so.
All right, thanks to Rachel Bach.